to the saints, not multiple faiths. One doctrine was delivered for all time, and we are to contend for that doctrine. Not for your denomination's doctrine, but for that doctrine that was delivered during those 40 days between the resurrection and the ascension.
Run from churches where there's no Bible, there's no cross in the theology, there's no soul-searching word, there's no repentance from sin, there's no mention of the blood of Jesus. Run! It's on.
This is True News. I'm Rick Wiles. The world must be quickly approaching another global financial crisis. What makes me think it's coming? Because international bankers are committing suicide again. There were so many dead bankers during the last crisis that I lost count of the bodies. The latest dead banker is Mr. Thomas Bowers, a former Deutsche Bank executive and chief of the German bank's private wealth management division in the USA. According to the coroner's report, Mr. Bowers, age 55, committed suicide by hanging himself in his Malibu, California home last Tuesday, November 19. New York Times reporter David Enrich first reported the death. Mr. Enrich is currently writing a book titled Dark Towers. It is based on the story told to him by Mr. Val Broschmidt. His father, William, was also a senior executive at Deutsche Bank. The 58-year-old Broschmidt also committed suicide by hanging himself at his home in London. Months after Broschmidt killed himself, another Deutsche Bank executive ended his life. Charlie Gambino, age 41, was found hanging from a stairway banister. Well, Thomas Bowers, the most recent dead banker, was the co-director of the German bank's Asset and Wealth Management Americas division, which is responsible for managing the U.S. and Latin American wealth of the bank's high net worth clients. Mr. Broschmidt, the banker who died in 2014, was in charge of Deutsche Bank Trust Company Americas. Now, here's where it starts to get very interesting. Thomas Bowers, the man who committed suicide last week, was the supervisor of Rosemary Rablik. Miss Rablik was the personal banker assigned by Deutsche Bank to Donald J. Trump. She allegedly facilitated the issuance of more than $300 million in bank loans to Mr. Trump before he was elected president of the United States. According to the New York Times, President Trump was introduced to Ms. Rablik by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, when Mr. Trump was looking for $100 million to purchase the Doral Golf Resort and Spa in Miami. At the same time, Ms. Rablik approved a $15 million line of credit to Jared Kushner and his mother. The newspaper reported that the German bank had previously declined to do business with Jared Kushner because his father went to prison after his conviction on corruption charges. Charles Kushner was prosecuted and sent to federal prison by Chris Christie, the U.S. attorney who later was elected as the Republican governor of New Jersey. The New York Times reported in early October that Val Broschmidt, son of William Broschmidt, the banker who committed suicide in London, has been cooperating with the FBI in its investigation of the German bank's operations in the USA. The Times said the son found a treasure trove of bank documents, including minutes of board of directors meetings, spreadsheets, and financial plans in his father's email account. Mr. Broschmidt met the musician Moby at a party, and Moby introduced Broschmidt to House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, who now is in possession of the bank records. Jared Kushner's name surprisingly appeared in a court deposition conducted this week in Florida. A Canadian businessman who has close personal and financial connections to royal families in the Middle East let loose with a torrent of allegations against Mr. Kushner and Mohammed bin Salman and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and many other influential people. Alan Binder was born in Kuwait. He now lives in Toronto. He was questioned during a deposition that was conducted via video from Toronto. He testified that Qatar had successfully bought off an array of American politicians and influence makers. Jared Kushner was one of the people named by Mr. Binder. The story has all the ingredients of a spy thriller movie. There's sex, money, murder, bribery, corruption. Doc Burkhart and Edward Zoll have been reading the court deposition all day, and they're here to tell me and you what they found. Guys, I came across this last night. I first saw it, Jerusalem Post.
Right.
See, I read Jewish newspapers all the time. That's why I know so much about what the Jews are doing, because I read the Jewish newspapers. I love reading the Jewish newspapers.
Because they'll tell you what they're doing.
They'll tell you what they're doing.
They boast about it.
Yes. So it's a good newspaper. Jerusalem Post is a really good newspaper. I like reading it.
Formerly the Palestine Post.
Yes. And so I was reading the Jerusalem Post last night at home, and I came across a story about Jared Kushner. And then I texted over to you guys and go, I said, you don't believe this story.
Well, I'd heard the story earlier in the day about Ilhan Omar and the deposition, but when you sent that over to us last night and said there was a Kushner connection in it to Qatari cash, then all of a sudden it was like, what's going on here? And it turns out that they're in this 223-page deposition, and we've been slogging through it all day today. Rick, there is just a ton of information in this deposition, and we're only going to get the tip of the iceberg today, but because there are so many connections in it, it will blow your mind.
Before we even get into what's in this deposition, let's start at the beginning. Who is Alan Binder, and what is the lawsuit? Who's suing who? What's this all about? Because it's based here in Florida.
Yes, it's coming out actually of the Tampa federal court, the 11th district of the U.S.
And actually it sprang up as a labor dispute. Basically, two people that were working for a member of the royal family from Qatar, they filed a labor dispute here with the state of Florida regarding overtime hours, and that they had been asked to kill somebody on behalf of the royal family.
Was that the overtime hours?
That was in the overtime hours, and so
they were asked to murder somebody?
That's in the testimony that they're giving. That is one of the things that they had been requested of this member of the royal family to do.
Yeah, so specifically, this lawsuit has been, the man who's deposed first off is Alan Binder. He's a Canadian businessman born actually in Kuwait. He went to university in Damascus, so he has a lot of connections in Syria and the other Middle Eastern countries there, and this is why he's been sought after as a fixer. Not just as a man who can maybe come up with financial or business connection solutions, networking for these different royal families, but a fixer by his own admission in the deposition. And the lawsuit, Rick, is actually the Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani. Now, the Thanis have been often associated with the involvement of arming of terrorists, trafficking of weapons, specifically with Operation Timber Sycamore.
The Sheikh of Qatar.
Yes, the Sheikh of Qatar.
The emir who runs Qatar.
Well, Al Thani doesn't actually doesn't run Qatar, but
his family.
Well, as we get into the deposition, we learn that it's his mother.
His mother runs Qatar.
But Al-Thani is like the playboy of the family and everything.
Okay.
He likes to drive fast cars, hang out with loose women and everything. Doesn't like to stay in Qatar because it's way too hot. And so he likes to travel the world. Well, in this traveling of the world, Al-Thani found himself in some situations here in the U.S. regarding racing in Los Angeles. I think we even did the story here about a year or so ago where he had been picked up and he claimed diplomatic immunity in that. But as this particular court case is going through the Pasco County Court here in Florida, they were calling in Mr. Bender as an informative witness to some of the activities that were going on. And I mean, he unloaded a ton, like we said, 200 pages of deposition in the testimony.
Yeah, so and the reason that they're able to go after him is there's two companies in the U.S. One is called Geostrategic Defense Solutions and KH Holdings. Now, these are the two companies which the labor disputes are basically being derived toward. Right. One is over a bodyguard who has claimed that he was forced at gunpoint to re-sign his contract. And the second was a medic that essentially was being put on 12 to 36-hour shifts while the caliph was going, the sheikh was going on benders, as it was described in the basically drug-fueled or extreme rage-filled work endeavors.
Okay, so all right, so we got a civil lawsuit here in Florida, and Bender is involved.
Right.
So Bender is a defendant.
He's, I guess the best way to describe it is an informative witness.
Informative witness, okay.
Because he can provide background on KH Holdings and on the strategic solutions.
But somehow, in a dispute over wages,
yes,
this got into a sex scandal, bribery, buy-off of politicians.
Right, because
Bender just started to spill his guts. He just blew it out.
Well, they came prepared to ask questions because they wanted to paint Al-Thani in as negative a light as they could. And so they had the questions prepared for Mr. Bender, who knew the answer to the questions. And, the way most of the media is playing this out is, well, look, he's making these accusations about Ilhan Omar and the connection to Qatar, that she's an agent of Qatar. That's what the headlines are reading, right? That she's being paid off, that she's a puppet of the Qatar royal family. But boy, there is much more to this story than meets the eye. It's not just about Ilhan Omar. It's about Jamal Khashoggi. It's about Jared Kushner. Rudy Giuliani is mentioned. Jeff Bezos is mentioned.
Ivanka Trump?
Yeah, Ivanka Trump is mentioned.
All right, let's start it. The Congresswoman Omar stuff. That's like the minor, lightweight stuff in this thing.
But it's the stuff that draws the conservative crowd in, because they say, oh, look, it's Ilhan Omar. She is, look, we told you she's bad news, and she's an agent here for Qatar. But they really can't go too far in it, because if they say that testimony that Bender is giving out regarding Omar is true, then they have to say all the rest of his testimony is true too.
Like with Kushner.
Yes.
That he's used mafia-like tactics to get his debts paid.
Right. And so there's been kind of this strange, media, I don't even know how to describe it, because the newspapers coming out, the media outlets coming out in the Middle East, they're just telling the whole story.
That's the Jerusalem Post.
Here in the West, yeah. But here in the
Post has got Kushner's name in it.
But here in the West, they'll say something about Ilhan Omar, or maybe in Linda Sarsour. She's implicated in this testimony as well. But they kind of back off on everything else. Or they'll say the testimony is in question.
Why is it in question? Because it's too hot?
It is too hot.
All right, let's go past the Omar. Okay, Omar, okay. Basically, she's a sex addict.
That's what they said.
She's bought off. She's owned by Qatar.
She's been groomed to basically not just take this position as a congresswoman, but maybe even the Oval Office one day.
Right. And they're saying the same thing about Linda Sarsour as well, that both Omar and Sarsour have been groomed before they ever ran, and that they continue to this day provide not only information to Qatar, but also to Iran via Qatar. So there's a lot of accusations.
The accusation that Congresswoman Omar is providing information to Qatar, that makes her a spy.
Right.
Yes.
Makes her an agent inside the U.S. House.
Right.
All right. If this is proven, she goes to prison. Well, you'd go to prison if we had a justice.
In a fair system, yes.
Yeah, in a fair system that upheld justice. But that's not here. But in that, in a real republic, she'd go to prison. I mean, these accusations that she's in the House, she was paid by Qatar to run for the House seat. She was financed by Qatar, and her job is to provide Qatar with information about the U.S. government.
Right.
Does that not make you a foreign agent?
That absolutely does.
That's the definition of it.
Or that makes you a traitor. That makes
Yes.
you a spy. So, I mean, it's not just a foreign agent. I mean, that's, you're on the bad end of the stick. And that, I think that's what the conflict is in this testimony. If it had just been about Ilhan Omar and Linda Sarsour, boy, I'm telling you, every conservative outlet would have been off to the races with this story.
They can't touch it because
can't.
Kushner's in it.
That's right.
And he's covered in Teflon.
Right.
Because if you start going down that road of what Kushner's involved in, it opens up a gigantic can of worms. So all right, so what's the next scandal that we should touch before we get to Kushner?
Oh,
We can talk about Giuliani. The mention of Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal attorney, which comes up on page 109 of this 223-page deposition. Specifically, Mr. Bender alleges that Rudy Giuliani works for the government of Qatar. Now, what was said in this is he was questioned, does Rudy Giuliani work with the government of Qatar?
that's the attorney's asking the
Attorney's
question.
asking
Asking the question of Mr. Bender here.
And Mr. Bender replied, I don't know if he works with them or for them, but he was their consultant. He was a lobbyist for them. And he also, according to the Qataris, had made a trip to Doha to facilitate a few $1 million worth a deal, contract with a cybersecurity company in the U.S. Now, he goes on to say he doesn't know who this is owned by. He thinks it's a friend of Rudy Giuliani. And he says the Qataris gave him the impression, this is Bender saying that he was given this impression by the royal family Qatar, that they recorded this conversation and they granted him between 8, 10, maybe $12 million in compensation. So if this is true, this would be an issue on multiple levels. One, because Rudy Giuliani was tapped to head the White House cyber security initiative. We actually addressed this in talking about the other issues that are facing Mr. Giuliani, specifically being subpoenaed, potentially facing his own issues with not registering as a foreign agent if he has been acting on behalf of private business individuals or a country. But this is completely different. In the case of the actual deposition given, this man is alleging money changed hands to another friend of Mr. Giuliani, maybe even Giuliani himself. This would pose maybe a very serious issue for the president directly, especially since Mr. Giuliani represents him in his personal matters.
Getting deeper. All right, let's move on to.
Can I share with you one episode that I found fascinating in the deposition as I read it today? Do you recall here, I guess it's been was 18 months ago, where that Qatari prince got kidnapped on a hunting trip?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
All right, so what's the story you remember, okay? What do you remember?
That's all I remember about it, Doc.
All right, but supposedly him and his hunting party, I guess they hunt in the desert, whatever it might be.
Went out with falcons to Iraq, I believe.
And they had got kidnapped by Hezbollah, right? And then they were held for some certain period of time, and some ridiculous ransom amount, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the story that is going on and reported in the media. It wasn't really that big of a deal, but it was a big deal to us. We talked about it. We thought, well, this is a weird deal. Well, Bender explains what happened in all that. That there never really was a kidnapping, that everybody was in on the kidnapping, the Qataris and Hezbollah, and what it was a setup it was kind of an apology tour. Remember when Barack Obama did his apology tour? Well, for Qatar, this was an apology tour to Saudi Arabia and Iran. It was a way to be able to pay off and say, we're sorry for interfering with your politics in Saudi Arabia and Iran, both of them, because Qatar was kind of playing both sides of the conflict in Yemen. So basically what the whole purpose of this, quote, kidnapping was was to provide funds to Hezbollah and funds to Saudi Arabia and Iran as we're sorry, we won't mess with this again. And the prince was returned home. Everybody was happy. And, you know, that's the story that Bender paints in all this, that there never was a real kidnapping.
It was fake.
It was all fake.
So it was
sham.
it was a way to launder the money?
Yes. It was a way to get money to Hezbollah, Saudi Arabia, and to Iran in order to say, and also to say, hey, we're sorry for messing around. Because there was a shift in policy with Qatar after that, and they decided, you know, we're so rich, we really don't need to hang out with these guys. We can set our own policy, our own strategies. And in fact, that is at the core of this deposition, because Bender repeats over and over again that it was the Qataris' goal to basically buy the White House. That was they've got $1 trillion, Rick, almost $1 trillion to spend. And they're putting this money all over Washington, D.C.
By the White House in the Obama years or the Trump years?
At some point in the future.
Anytime.
Anytime.
And ongoing. I believe in the deposition, Mr. Bender noted that it's the White House, Department of Defense, the State Department, any level of government, even journalists. Mr. Bender said pretty openly that there are specific outlets that the Qataris told him they have their men in, with CNN being named as one of them. He claims there's an actual commentator, a real, someone who's on air right now.
Wait a minute. Mr. Bender said Qatari government officials told him that Qatari has agents working inside American news media outlets,
including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CNN. He named those three specifically.
Yeah, I've got the quote is telling. This even goes past, I'd say, this incident. This is really telling to what is capable by any government at this point. He said, this is page 56 and 57 of the deposition, the Qataris leaked info to the Saudis, hoping they would pick up Khashoggi, who is leaking and being paid by both sides. Bender says, being a journalist is the best cover for any intelligence agency. When they want to send someone in, they give him a title of being a journalist, or they recruited a journalist.
So Jamal Khashoggi was a writer for the Washington Post.
Right.
Yes.
He was. But we also know that he was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. And he was the go-between Saudi Arabia. Now, Bender said this. He was the go-between Saudi Arabia and Osama bin Laden.
Right.
He was the connection.
Right.
It was like,
pictures of it. There was pictures of Khashoggi and bin Laden.
But along the way here,
pictures of bin Laden in the bushes, too.
And Bender gives some more background on the whole Khashoggi murder here. And he says what happened along the way is Khashoggi was providing secrets to the Qataris on the Saudis, and then he'd turn around and give information to the Saudis about the Qataris.
He's double dipping.
Right. And so basically what they did is they made arrangements, the Qataris actually are the ones that made arrangements for Khashoggi to end up in Istanbul.
The Qataris did?
Yes. They made the arrangements for Khashoggi to end up there.
So they lured him in.
They came that a penthouse was given.
A penthouse was given to his fiancée. They couldn't give it to Khashoggi, but they gave it to his fiancée.
Because he was getting married.
That's right. By the way, his fiancée, and Bender explains this too, has a very close friendship with Erdogan. Okay? So the Qataris made the arrangements to get Khashoggi into Istanbul and said, yeah, just go to the consulate there, get everything taken care of. And then they passed that information off to the Saudis. And they said, listen, you've got a guy that's been hitting us, but he's also been hitting you. We don't want him anymore. You can have him. And what Bender says what the Qataris were expecting was that they were just going to pick him up, bring him back to Saudi Arabia. They didn't expect that they were actually going to pick him up and then saw him up. That was Bender's position on it. But basically what Alan Bender is saying is Qataris provided that information to the Saudis that ended up getting Khashoggi killed.
So Bender implicated the Qataris in the Khashoggi murder.
Right.
Okay, so we have a sex scandal, we have a murder scandal, we have espionage, we have spies, foreign agents working as reporters allegedly for the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN. All right, that's according to Mr. Bender.
We've also got money laundering.
Money laundering?
Oh, man.
One of the things that Mr. Bender alleged in his deposition, and this, I'll just read his quote. He said, "Casino chips are untraceable. So they give you a casino chip from Monte Carlo that's worth $100,000. He was asked, so they launder money using casino chips? To this he said, yes. He went on to basically detail that one of the ways, multiple ways, they were paying agents in government, agents in media, agents even as fixers, was through mediums such as casinos, casino chips, using basically false companies even to donate money into.
All right, so give you an example.
I never thought about this. So
give you an example.
Coin.
Right, so give you an example. There's a big casino in Detroit, right?
Right.
So they could essentially send a person with a stack of chips to Detroit, to the casino, cash in those chips at the window and get actual cash there, and then take that money, and they, Bender makes this implication in the deposition, actually take that money and hand it off to, let's say, an Ilhan Omar in cash. Okay, I mean, it's really ingenious, and that opens up all sorts of possibilities. Because think of, Ben Talil. By the way, Alan Bender, it says in this deposition he was one of the few people that could out-negotiate Ben Talil, Prince Ben Talil,
The Saudi prince.
the CEO of the Four Seasons, right? And that caused us to think the Four Seasons in Mandalay Bay. Do you remember Stephen Paddock? And how he would gamble
shooter.
all the time?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, you guys are going somewhere here.
So,
And they've raised
the Las Vegas serial murder.
So if you've got somebody that owns a number of casinos, which Ben Talil did, and other Saudi princes also own, and by the way, Donald Trump also owns some casinos too. What a great way to transfer money back and forth. And what do you think's easier, Rick, to counterfeit a $100 bill or a $100 chip?
I had never thought about this. I've never thought about that crooks launder money through casino chips.
What do you think they started in Las Vegas, Rick?
I'm not a crook. I don't think this way. But so
they've just taken it global now.
A casino chip was the original crypto coin.
Yes.
Right. It's a currency that is above currencies.
And it's untraceable. Now you think about this, unless you're making note, and I'm sure some of the casinos do make note of who comes in with different chips to retrieve.
So now what we have to do is demand that casinos have, that every chip have an RFID tracking device and a serial number, so that you can prohibit the laundering of money. I don't think that's going to happen, because that sounds to me like this is a tried and true long time practice of laundering money.
They've done it. Bender says this is a regular occurrence, and this is the way they have transferred money. That's not the only way. Another way is through purchasing, companies or purchasing real estate, and that's where the whole, conversation regarding Jared Kushner comes up. Two things with that. One is the political future, what they're looking at. The Qataris said we want to buy the White House, and they have used their wealth to this point to that end, and they have about $700 billion in the bank to spend just for this in the Qatari investment fund.
Going back to the casino chip, does the deposition mention whether any politicians were paid off with casino chips?
It doesn't, but it notes the use of PayPal, other mediums, as Doc mentioned, property, and that there was even a payment scheme that some journalists would sell their soul, essentially, for $5,000, as little as that. For journalists, it could go up to $1 million if that individual could offer influence. But for politicians, they said that they would cap it out much higher. 5, 10, into the multi-millions of dollars could be transferred. And based on what Bender said, we can only assume that casinos and others were used as one of the medians.
Okay, another thing they would do too on the real estate side is they would set up foundations or shell companies that would purchase properties, various places around the world. So they actually own the property, but they would say to, let's say, Edward, he's a congressman from Iowa, for instance, and they said, we want some influence. Here's what we'll do. We can't give you, anything, but we can promise you that at some point in the future, you might at some point actually have this deed transferred to your name.
Kind of like Jeffrey Epstein?
So
yes,
that would
Les
be
Wexner
handed
giving
over.
the New York mansion over for nothing, not almost everything, nothing.
And so it's a promise of a future payoff. You know, there's nothing that changes hands now, but at some point in the future, it explains.
If you perform,
right?
If you perform and deliver the goods, someday a deed may be handed off to you.
It would explain why someone, let's say like Mitch McConnell, can go from a $1.5 million family valuation to $22 million on a $150,000 a year salary. You know, suddenly, things pay off in the future. Oh, they're just great investments. Look, this investment paid off in a big way.
Okay, so yesterday we were talking about WeWork, I think, because we were talking about all this money that's disappearing with WeWork, and we were saying, what a wonderful idea! What an ingenious way to launder money through a failed business. Like the whole purpose of the business is to fail, so that you can disappear hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars. And when anybody asks about it, you go, I lost the money. It's a bad business. But it was actually designed to be a bad business.
Right. So you can take like state funds, let's say Qatari state funds, invest in some sort of investment project, and then those funds would be paid out through the failing company of some kind to individuals or other shell companies controlled by individuals. I mean, it's ingenious. And, when you think of all these big tech companies too, like Facebook and others, they don't make a profit, and yet they're successful. So what's going on there? Have we been seeing this for a long time? Is WeWork just one example of a pattern that's been going on for, who knows how long, on filtering out global currency, money, laundering it through corporate funds?
Well, we make this joke here regularly. We say, someday, True News, we will lose billions of dollars every year, and that's when we know we'll be successful. When we're losing billions of dollars, because that's the way business has become in America today. On a little side note, you guys said something to me yesterday or the day before about WeWork, and
I know where he's going with this.
Everett and Doc have worked here too long because they're starting to think, not just like me, they're thinking beyond where I'm thinking.
Well, it might be better to first just explain what the business model of WeWork is.
Yeah.
Basically what it is you get in a city of any significant size,
London, Chicago, New York.
WeWork sets up like this co-working environment, and what that means is they provide desk and printers and
internet,
coffee, conference rooms and everything for a flat fee per month. Your company can have employees there working.
Completely furnished office.
Right,
yes.
Completely. So you don't have to worry about things like buying furniture, paying for internet.
No overhead.
One flat fee. They even provide payroll services. All the web services, the whole 9 yards in each of these locations. Well, and I'll throw it to Edward here because he's really the one that thought of it. But
so we got to think one of the main friends now we know of the WeWork CEO, Adam Newman, is Jared Kushner. We reported on this story that they basically practice Kabbalah together. They even, in a sense here, work together to help Jared Kushner's Middle East Peaces plan, the peace summit held in Bahrain. I'm kind of thinking, how far did that relationship go? We've heard reports of Jamal Khashoggi and use of Pegasus software coming out of Israel. We've heard reports of Jared Kushner maybe sharing this with the Saudi prince. We wonder, well, maybe did he share that with the WeWork company? We pose the question of, if you owned workspaces in the most prosperous cities in the world, what would happen if you started putting listening devices in them?
And you've got a hot, hip new company and, a location. Hey, we work at the WeWork place.
So the real purpose, we're not, all right, so just for legal purposes, we're not saying that was the purpose of WeWorks. We're just saying, what if a company such as WeWorks,
right?
It's a purely hypothetical scenario.
A future competitor to WeWorks says, let's take that WeWorks model, let's put offices all over the world, have them totally furnished, invite new startup companies to come in, set up their companies in our offices, and they don't know that we're listening to every conversation in the office.
That we're reading every email.
We're monitoring the use of the internet, any kind of traffic going.
That would be a really evil, wicked idea, Doc.
That would, but it's not without precedent, Rick, because back in the days of the mob, and I would maintain even to this day, but they have shown that in the past, the mob would set up fancy restaurants, right? You know, a beautiful restaurant, the best food, the best service and everything, and invite
Hotels,
the leaders of the city to come in, and dine and have the best food and just be able to have a place, that's kind of their own. All the while, right in the middle of the table, with the big old flowers sticking up there, they're recording every conversation going on. Every single conversation, then using that information either as leverage for blackmail purposes or for investment purposes to be able to say...
Or corporate espionage, steal the idea.
Right, and so be able to, move in on someone and say, yeah, we know that you're going to be, opening up the New Jersey market and we want to cut. You're not going to open this market without us. So it's not without precedent for the mob to do that. But we've just moved it into the 21st century. I mean, if someone wanted to do that.
That is a very real possibility that companies are being, these co-working environments now, that some of them are actual
honeypots of information.
Honeypots of information to steal information, corporate espionage.
And this valuation model of WeWork, so over the past 6 months when they announced, their funding phase, so there was tons of money coming in, and they were putting valuations, there's as high as $20 billion, on WeWork's valuation. It's since dropped. But think of all that money that flooded in to into the investments in WeWork. Where'd that money go, Rick? Did it just disappear when the market went down? It went to people who, bought out the stock.
That's right.
So what a wonderful way to be able to launder money, if someone wanted to do that.
Where's all the Federal Reserve's repo money going?
That's a great question.
Every night,
$25 to $50 billion a day.
We're easily in the trillions now.
It just disappears into a black hole.
No one is asking about it. Zero Hedge is about the only one talking about it. Nobody else does. I mean, where does it go?
So let's get back to Alan Bender and these sensational accusations against politicians and business leaders here in the United States. Congresswoman Omar, he said, is a sex addict. Said she's on the take with Qatar. She's an agent for Qatar. He said that Qatar has agents working at the Washington Post, CNN, the New York Times. He brought up the name of Jared Kushner.
Right. So all this other stuff that was in this particular deposition, as I said before, normally that would be fodder for every conservative news outlet out there. But then Jared Kushner's name came up in this conversation. It had to do with the infamous 666 Fifth Avenue. That should tell you something right there. The former Jehovah's Witness headquarters, by the way. That's where they used to have their headquarters.
Started by Charles Taze Russell,
right,
who most people who've looked into it believe Russell was a Freemason. Russell always said he wasn't.
So whenever you used to get those Watchtower magazines where it talked about the Watchtower Publishing House, it used to be at 666 Fifth Avenue in New York. Okay. But the Kushners invested in it and put their money in it and remodeled it, refurbished it, did all this other stuff. But it was a losing proposition for them, Rick. They
a bankrupting proposition.
Yeah, I mean, it was, something. I mean, it's a great location. I mean, it's just a block or two from Rockefeller Center. I mean, it's a great location, but for a variety of different reasons, it just didn't take. And that's where the folks in Qatar come in.
All right, so what did Jared Kushner need to balance the books at 666 Fifth Avenue?
Oh, just a small $1.4 billion.
Billion?
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. You mean million?
No, $1.4 billion.
$1.4 billion?
And that's the amount that Alan Bender alleges was passed through a Canadian investment firm called Brookfield to that Kushner company for the bailout.
There's no way he spent $1.5 billion on a building.
Well, that was his loss right there. That was his loss on the building.
How would you lose $1.5 billion on a building?
Now that's a great question. In fact, the investment people in Qatar, when they, according to Bender here in this whole deposition they gave, they said, well, this is a losing investment for us. Why should we do this? And yet, we have to do it. That's what they said, right?
That's correct. And according to Bender, it was actually part of a ordering and such, a leveraging by Jared Kushner using his position in the White House as both a special advisor to the president, but also the point man for peace negotiations in the region, that if Qatar didn't go along with this scheme, that the dogs would be let loose onto them, specifically referring to a potential invasion by the UAE and the Saudi military.
Let's go to the deposition, pages 91 through 100. Bender said, I was told that Brookfield, who's Brookfield?
Brookfield is a Canadian investment firm that the Qataris have actually bought a stake in and transferred the money through.
So Bender said in the deposition, I was told that Brookfield was one of the companies that Qatar used to pay Jared Kushner $1.4 billion to pay off his debts and his real estate in the U.S. Question, for 666 Fifth Avenue? Answer, correct. And according to them, they had to do it.
Right.
Question, they had to do it? Qatar had to pay Brookfield that amount of money? The answer from Bender, not Brookfield, pay Kushner through Brookfield. Question, and why did they have to? Why couldn't they pay Kushner directly? Answer, too risky. Question, for what? Media, government. Everyone would notice that Qatar paid him directly, but, question, violations of U.S. law? Yes. Which they don't think it exists. They said that once the Democrats, they said, we recruited both Republicans and Democrats, but that's not good enough. We want to rule the White House, so they will. Question, the government of Qatar would like to rule the White House? Answer, yes, through their own recruits. Question, through Congress? Answer, yes. Question, through the Senate? Through paying off people? Yes, through the Senate. Yes. Question, through American officials? Yes. And was Qatar well aware that the money was going to go to Kushner before they paid Brookfield? Answer, Qatar is the largest or one of the largest investors in Brookfield in billions of dollars. One of the ways that it became so handy is that when Kushner demanded the money.
Right.
The question, Jared Kushner demanded the money. Question again, did he approach the Qataris or did they approach him?
And the claim by Bender is, no, they claim that Mr. Kushner approached them. And the attorney asked the question again, just for clarification. Jared Kushner approached the government of Qatar for a bailout of 666 Fifth Avenue. And he goes on to say, correct, that's what they told me. They said they didn't want to pay him because he apparently either Jared Kushner or his father approached the Qataris before they won the White House. And the lawyer reminded him, well, his father's in prison, so it was probably, his father's a felon, it was probably Jared himself, though you do have an email system called CoreLink in federal prison that allows you to correspond with people outside the Bureau of Prisons. So anyway, it goes on to say they were approached about this specific property. And it was years before they took over the White House. And as Edward said, that the whole story goes on that Jared Kushner basically said, we're going to do this deal, or I'm going to release the dogs on you.
Wait, you want to hear the mafia?
Yes.
This is mafia talk, okay, right here. The question to Alan Bender. There's no by the book for this scenario. Alan said no, and the Qataris guaranteed. Question, is it illegal? He answered, yeah, guaranteed it. And apparently an executive from Brooksfield was refusing to accept this deal. And they said, we just had a scandal here, and this is going to be another scandal because this is people's money. And they said, well, don't touch people's money, touch our money. Just do it. And they did it. And Kushner's happy with him because, according to them, I don't know Kushner personally, but the Qataris said, Kushner told them, choose one or two. You pay what I tell you to pay, or I unleash my dogs. Question, and the dogs being who? Bender said, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Question, those are big dogs, powerful dogs. Answer is yes. And he goes on to note that this could have basically resulted in an invasion of the very small kingdom of Qatar from those two countries.
It goes on to say there, though, Rick, is that as the lawyer presses in on the 666 Fifth Avenue deal, that Bender said that the Qataris, they had to do it. But they've got the money to do it. But they've got 600 plus, close to $700 billion that they can invest. So 1.4 billion wasn't, was just a drop in the bucket for them. But if you read it, it says here, yes, and they told me they won't see a penny of that money because it's a lost cause. They considered this $1.4 billion investment a lost cause. They said, this is the worst investment in history, and we know we're not getting anything. We just paid it to pay off debt. And as long as he's in the White House, referring to Jared Kushner, we have to do what he wants until we control the White House. We as in
Well, who was elected president? Was it Jared Kushner?
No, it's Donald J. Trump.
Yes, but he said as long as Kushner's in the White House.
And they're definitely referring to the Trump
So
administration.
here we go again. We have a Israeli foreign agent, Jared Kushner, operating in the White House. I hope ADL's watching. Get your little tweeter going and get your tweets out there.
Well, they'll just say Jared Kushner's being taken advantage of by Muslims then.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So you've got a shakedown. That's what this is. This is a shakedown by Jared Kushner. And he's telling the Qataris, I'm going to turn loose the hounds of hell on you. And who are the hounds of hell?
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. Now, the first thing that came to my mind when I read this is I thought back, and I don't know, a year or two ago.
It was around June of 2017.
17. We were still over in the other studio.
Yes.
Okay. And we were still audio at that time. We had not gone, I think we were just on the verge of going video, if I recall. And there was this push inside, it was Saudi Arabia was accusing Qatar of being a financing conduit for terrorism.
Specifically Yemen.
Yemen.
Yeah.
And Saudi Arabia was talking about militarily invading Qatar. Do you remember this, guys?
Even building a moat. There's a lot of talk from MBS, the conference at the time.
You all remember this? Saudi Arabia was talking about invading Qatar. This is 2017.
And cutting Qatar off
Yes.
from the peninsula.
Yes, they were going to cut them
build
off.
a big giant ditch.
Yes.
And cut them off.
And we talked about it on True News. And then the most amazing thing happened. The Trump administration intervened, and President Trump said, Qatar's, they're good guys. They're not terrorists.
Where weeks before they had said that they were.
They were terrorists. But
Yes.
then there was a sudden change of heart in the Trump administration, and instead of having the Saudis invade Qatar to cut off the flow of terror. Oh, wasn't this right after President Trump went to Saudi Arabia?
Yes, and that's really, they did a double flip-flop. It started actually in May because the
He
president
went there and he
first foreign
said,
trip.
you've got to cut
Work together.
Saudi Arabia, you've got to cut off the flow of money to terrorists. And the Saudis said, okay, we'll invade Qatar. Right? Do you remember this?
We even pulled a story, number 7 for Control. He went to, this is actually the infamous photo of President Trump putting his hands on that glowing bowl
There it is.
with the king of Saudi Arabia, the president of Egypt, al-Sisi. This was to build ties, strengthen ties with the Muslim world. It was literally 2 weeks after this that Saudi Arabia, with a few of the other members at this conference, cut off one of these countries, which is being talked about being included in this coalition of Arab nations.
So what we were being told at that time is that the king of Saudi Arabia said, okay, Mr. President, we're on board. We're going to cut out all that terrorism funding. And the biggest funder of terrorism is Qatar. And we're going to invade Qatar. And we're going to put the hurt on money going to terrorist organizations. And so for, I don't know if it was weeks or a month or two, it looked like Saudi Arabia was going to invade its fellow Muslim country, Qatar. I think this is really strange.
And then the Emir of Qatar came, paid the president a visit.
Yes, he did. And
they had a good old chat.
And all of a sudden, the potential war was over. So what I asked Edward to do today, I said, see if you can match up dates in this deposition with that potential war between Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and when the Trump administration intervened and said, Qatar is okay, we're okay with them. They're not funding terrorists anymore.
Well, in fact, President Trump said the Emir is a good guy.
Yes. And is that connected to Jared Kushner paying off his $1.4 billion in debt on 666 Fifth Avenue?
Not only are there connections, but there are independent reports, if you start to piece them together, of not only a pay-for-play scheme in regard to 666, which was publicly under issue of being able to pay back a large amount of interest, tax dues on that building, but specifically, there are independent reports of Jared Kushner. No one could explain at the time, but Jared Kushner and his wife intervening, specifically in the case of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, that coincide with the dates not just in the deposition, but of the blockade and the subsequent folding of that policy.
Okay, here's what I'm proposing. This is my scenario. That when Saudi Arabia was threatening to invade Qatar, it was actually at the behest of Jared Kushner. That Jared Kushner was doing the shakedown of Qatar, and saying, I want $1.4 billion to pay off my debt at 666 Fifth Avenue. The Qataris are saying, this is crazy. This is a losing deal. We're going to lose 1.4. This is not a business investment. Right. This is what? This is a shakedown.
Right.
We're being forced to do it.
If Bender is right, that Kushner told the Qataris, give me the $1.4 billion or I turn loose the hounds of hell on you, meaning Saudi Arabia and UAE, then that is a shakedown. And then he's got his friend, Mohammed bin Salman, all right, and he tells his buddy, hey, act like you're going to invade. Move some troops to the border. Flex your muscles. Just act like you're getting ready to invade. What's up, bro? Hey, I'll give you a little bit of it. All right, little. I got some money flowing from the Qataris. I mean, that's a real possibility. That's what happened.
And if it was, let's say the reports were just that, that's already scandalous.
That's mafia style.
That's mafia scandal. Right. All right, so I was looking to see, is there anyone else who can read a deposition out? There's anyone else who's been covering this story like us? Well, it turns out, Rick, there's an independent reporter who has covered this from a separate angle. It's much worse than what you even just described. It actually involves specific travel by Jared Kushner, a meeting by Charles Kushner prior to it, something that Alan Bender mentioned. Well, Vicky Ward, someone who's been big on the Epstein scandal.
Kushner Incorporated.
Wrote Kushner Incorporated, spoke to family members in the Kushner family, and even spoke to many individuals who worked in the State Department while Jared Kushner was undermining Rex Tillerson. Well, she had quite a lot to say on this specific subject of 666 Fifth Avenue, the Qataris, and the Kushner intervention.
What did she say?
She said that there absolutely was a case to be made, that not just the timeline, but it was the goal even of Charles Kushner directing Jared. This is again Charles Kushner, the felon, the man who literally honeypotted his brother-in-law. This is the man who directed this initiative that Jared Kushner then basically became the ambassador of throughout the Trump administration.
When did Vicky Ward make these allegations?
She made these accusations in March
of this year.
This is well
before this story came out. This story just came out yesterday.
Yeah, before the stories came out, for the deposition.
She was making these connections back then, 6 months ago.
All right, do we have a soundbite? Do we have a video, anything of Vicky Ward?
Yes. I pulled a soundbite from this interview she gave to the Krasencast, and it'll be number 10 for control. Listen very carefully to her describe, from her own sources, from her research for the Kushner Inc. book, the other end of the story for the 666 cash mafia scandal.
But the essential thrust of it is that Jared Kushner has been running around the Middle East using it as a sort of private casino to solve his very real financial problems. So you have to remember that Jared went into this administration with a financial albatross around his neck. This building, 666 Fifth Avenue in New York, a building that was bleeding money. No American investors would touch it, with a 50-foot pole. And the Kushners had until February 2019 to offload it somehow. And it became increasingly unclear how they were going to do it. In the spring, in April of 2017, Charles Kushner, Jared's father, lined up at the St. Regis Hotel in New York, and when the Qatari finance minister was in town. The Qatari finance minister had long known Charles Kushner, took the meeting as a courtesy. Charles Kushner asked for $1 billion, according to someone in that meeting to whom I have spoken. The Qataris turned Charles Kushner down because the deal was a bad deal. What I have learnt is that in the ensuing month before the US visit to Riyadh, Jared Kushner got on a plane and flew to Doha, the Qatari capital, and he reamed the Qatari ruling family, the Al Thanis, for not doing the deal with his father. Absolutely reamed them. They began to feel that he was indirectly threatening their sovereignty. The next thing they know, they show up to the summit in Riyadh. The Emir, the ruler of Qatar, arrives with an entourage, but his entourage is suddenly cut off from him and not allowed into the summit at the same time by the Saudis, which he felt was a move to deliberately make him look weak. Now you have to remember, during the summit, Jared and Ivanka go off for a cozy, secret, unmonitored dinner with MBS. Nobody knows what they talked about. 10 days later, when, to the horror of Tillerson and Mattis, the United States supports this blockade of Qatar, what the Qataris found was not just a blockade. There were Saudi and Emirati troops on their border. What they interpreted this as was Jared Kushner basically saying, if you don't pay my father, pay off this building, look what's going to happen. The Americans are going to sanction an invasion of your country. Sources in the State Department say, yes, it is true, troops were on the border. And 9 months later, just follow the sequence of events here. 9 months later, late spring of 2018, a Canadian company, Brookfield Partners, whose largest outside shareholder is the Qatari Investment Authority. They own $1.8 billion of that fund, by far the largest outside shareholder. It should be noted that the Saudis and the Emiratis are also limited partners, but that's nothing like as much money as the Qataris have in Brookfield. They bail out the Kushner building, and they bail it out in a deal that makes absolutely no economic sense. They do a 99-year lease, and they pay the entire 99-year lease up front. You don't need to be good at math. You don't need to be in the New York real estate community to understand how crazy that is. And let us not forget that the Kushners, in addition to this building hemorrhaging money, the Kushners had serious tax liabilities on it when the building came due. And this deal is not only sort of madness from a math point of view, it's clearly done to accommodate the Kushners' tax requirements. So when you stand back and you look at the geopolitics, and at the same time as this deal gets done, the US withdraws its support of the blockade of Qatar. Okay, as so many people, as I say in the book, it stinks. Charlie Kushner says in the book, is quoted as saying, I always had the Qataris in my back pocket.
I never heard this. That's the first time I've heard Vicky Ward say these things. So last night when I read the article, this is the first thing that pops in my head is the Qatari, the threat in 2017 to invade Qatar.
Right.
And I was just thinking, was Kushner that dirty that he threatened that the United States and Saudi Arabia would invade Qatar if they wouldn't pay off his debt at 666? Is he really that crooked?
I think what he was saying to them is we wouldn't stop Saudi Arabia and the UAE from moving in.
Well, Vicky Ward is alleging that he was the green light, basically, that they wouldn't have even threatened, let's say, a military blockade of a country that has a U.S. air base in it, had it not had the support of someone very close to the president.
Okay, so think about the Ukraine scandal. That President Trump's accused of threatening to withhold U.S. aid if the president of Ukraine did not investigate Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden obviously should be investigated. There's no doubt about that. They're all crooks. We don't have any Boy Scouts in this story at all. They're all crooks. They're all mafia. It's one mafia gang fighting another mafia gang.
Right.
That's why they want to win the election. To rape, pillage, plunder for 4 years. That's what it's all about. So let's not pretend that one side's cleaner than the other. They're both crooks.
Yeah,
right?
We're not rooting for one side or the other either.
I want them all to go to prison. But the Ukraine scandal, it's
about this tall.
Peanuts.
Well, by definition, it's 3 times smaller.
But it's peanuts. You're talking about withholding U.S. aid until you get an investigation. If Vicky Ward is right, if my intuition is right about...
If Alan Bender's right.
And Alan Bender's right about Qatar, then Jared Kushner threatened a sovereign nation with war if they did not pay his personal debt. Is that what the three of us are saying?
Yes, that's basically based on what Alan Bender has testified to in his deposition in a court of law. Under oath. What Vicky Ward is saying here. And I believe that's the whole reason why Rex Tillerson stepped down too. That, it wasn't a matter where he was trying to stop what was going on there, but rather he knew what was going on there. And he couldn't stay in the administration any longer.
Well, because Rex Tillerson wasn't allowed to be the Secretary of State.
Right.
Jared Kushner was the Secretary of State.
Yes.
Rex Tillerson would walk into restaurants and find Jared Kushner in the back room meeting with an ambassador.
Head of Mexico, head of one of these Arab countries we've talked about.
It was Mexico.
It was Mexico.
That's right.
I know we're limited on time here, but there is one little side story here related to the Kushners that popped up in this testimony with Alan Bender as well. It had to do with Yael Kushner, who goes by the name of Ivanka Trump. Do you want to jump in on this? And so what
Alan Bender alleged, on top of what he's already said about Jared, he alleged that Ivanka Trump is being paid by the Saudi government. What? In the deposition, he's asked you, this is part of the section where he's being asked about where are the Qatari agents? The questioner asked, the White House? He answered, Jared Kushner. The questioner asked, what about his wife? Mr. Bender answered, he said, We paid her, but the Saudis beat us to that. So I decided that Jared Kushner will take from Qatar and Saudi Arabia. She takes from Saudi Arabia.
And that would explain.
Wait, I got to wrap my head around. Bender said that Qatar is paying a salary. Qatar's paying money to Jared Kushner.
Or getting benefits from to Kushner.
And that Saudi Arabia is paying his wife, Yael Kushner, a.k.a. Ivanka.
Right. That's what
That they're milking both countries.
Yes.
They're essentially doing what Jamal Khashoggi was alleged to have been doing.
Well, it sounds like what the Clintons did.
Right.
I mean, didn't we vote against this kind of rampant open corruption? Isn't this part of the referendum for 2016?
I would like to see Ivanka in the same prison cell with Hillary, and I'd like to see Bill Clinton in the same prison cell with Donald Trump. And I'd like to see Jared Kushner in a cell with his dad.
Lock them up.
Yeah, there's our new slogan. Lock them all up.
Now, Rick, you know, as you've observed Saudi Arabia, how do they treat women in Saudi Arabia?
Pretty bad.
Pretty much like dirt, right?
Yeah.
You know, they just started driving cars not too long ago. They have to wear a veil. Even remember when President Bush visited Saudi Arabia and his wife, she wore a veil while she was there. And even Michelle Obama, you know, would wear a veil in the presence, a head covering in the presence of Saudi royalty. When Yael Kushner went to Saudi Arabia, she didn't do any of that. She didn't cover her head. She didn't do any of that.
She did.
No.
How'd she get a pass?
You tell me, Rick. How did she get a pass? They already had her in their pocket. They had them. They had her in their pocket already. They didn't care whether she did or not. It wasn't an issue for them. And then she can go and make women's empowerment speeches in Saudi Arabia. Right? They don't care because they've got her.
She was empowered. She was empowered with Saudi money.
Hey, before we close, I got to ask you a question about Jared Kushner. Is the peace deal done? Because the president has now said that Jared Kushner is in charge of building the border wall. Is the peace deal finished now?
What border wall?
Yes. What peace deal?
Does Mexico have some money that he can get his hands on? I mean, is that what Kushner's going to do? Is he going to go to Mexico City and is he going to do a shakedown in Mexico? Either you pay off my debt or we build a wall. You pay off my debt or we cut off all bank wire transfers from Walmart that are coming into Mexico.
Well, you take that gold medallion you awarded me for the USMCA and you turn it to platinum.
Remember, the president said that Mexico was going to pay for that wall, and the way he was going to do it was through those wire transfers.
Yes.
And so...
But he didn't say that the money was actually going to come to the American Treasury. He just said to go pay for it.
They're going to pay for it.
It might be going to Jared's bank account.
So, is the peace deal done? Is it kaput because of everything going on right now?
Yeah, the whole plan has fallen apart.
Was there ever a plan?
The plan was to make
a whole bunch of
fortune with building hotels and businesses and corporations on Palestinian land. That was the plan. That's the plan. The plan was to mass migrate the Palestinians to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, anybody would take them, so that the Jews could steal every square inch of the West Bank and Gaza. Because the only thing that's holding them back are those pesky, determined, stubborn Palestinians who will not leave the land. So the Jared Kushner Trump peace plan was nothing more than a way to push the Palestinians off the land so that they could have a massive real estate development program. I mean, Bibi said last week that his plan is they're going to have 50 biblical tourist sites.
Yes. Right.
Because the American evangelicals are going to come by the millions.
Yes. And he's right. They will.
Yes.
He's
But
smart.
they'll also, the evangelicals will also buy condos.
Yes.
Isn't
On
this what we said?
Palestinian land.
Isn't this what we said when Mike Huckabee was laying
Yes.
down the cornerstone? We said they're
Yes.
going to build condos. They're going to pay these people
Yes.
off with vacation homes.
Maybe even offer
Unbelievable.
dual citizenship.
That's right.
If they don't already have it.
Real moneymaker.
But when the announcement came yesterday that Jared Kushner had now been put in charge of the border wall, I was like, okay, the deal, that's done. When they're not concerned about the deal anymore. You know, it's either put on hold for a while or whatever it is. Now we've got a whole new project.
What border wall?
Yeah, they on record, they've only replaced damaged wall or eroding wall. There's no new wall that's been built. No glistening, beautiful wall that we were told about in the various rallies.
So
folks, when you go to the rallies now and you say build that wall, you're asking Jared to do it now. Think about that.
But Jared was the one who managed the first rallies and stood in the back and laughed at the stupid, gullible goyim
Well, he came up with a slogan, remember?
that were chanting the slogans he gave them.
Remember, keep America great?
Lock
Remember
her up.
The term that made it its way into the purge?
Drain the swamp.
And the very man that he brought
This is
into the White
all
House?
Jared Kushner. He managed the campaign rallies. But let's focus on the allegation. We have in a Florida court, under sworn deposition, a Canadian businessman stating that the Qatari government paid off the debt of Jared Kushner, $1.4 billion for 666 Fifth Avenue. If that isn't a scandal, I don't know what is a scandal. Now, if the Democrats want to investigate something, I'm all with you. Let's go for it. But you can't. You can't because Jared Kushner is protected.
Right.
He's protected. Why is he protected?
Well,
Because he's a Jew. That's why he's protected.
And also on Omar, too, in the testimony that Bender gave, the attorney asked him, are those that are in power in Congress aware that the Qataris are funding Ilhan Omar? Mm-hmm. Of course they know. They allow it. They allow it.
But I think the Ilhan Omar of it, I think that part of the testimony was a diversion.
Oh, yeah.
They snuck in all these others. Unless you actually read the 223 pages like we did today, you wouldn't know about this.
There's hardly anybody reporting it.
Right.
In the few organizations in America that have reported it, some of them like Daily Caller, Tucker Carlson, they came out and said right away last night, there's nothing to it. Don't read it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is. There's a lot to it.
Oh, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if it's not true, then this guy has the most perceptive imagination of anyone out there.
Well, he's at risk himself of being sued. Yeah. If this isn't true, he just made up this testimony. He's going to get sued.
Believe me, and not only that, but he would perjure himself.
Perjury, you're right.
And one of the things I did last night was, kind of look at the background of Alan Bender and see if there's a history with him. Yeah, there's documented history of him, having these relationships with the Qataris, with the Saudis, him having dinner with Prince Talil. I mean, he has these connections. I mean, this isn't something imaginary. I mean, he really does have these connections. Why he's coming out, in fact, in the deposition, he says that he was told by the Qatari government, several members of the Qatari government, don't give this deposition. Not to threaten him, but they said, we have already determined the outcome of this. So there's no sense in giving a deposition. You can give a deposition if you want to, Alan, but we've already determined the outcome of this case. That's what he said in the deposition. He even accused the attorney that was questioning him in this deposition, said that that you're probably already compromised. And I was just like, wow, this is. I mean, it read like a spy novel.
Let's see what happens to Mr. Bender if he's found hanging from the staircase, like some bankers. Let's go. At the beginning of the program, I was talking about the bankers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the latest banker, just a week ago, This happened to be the supervisor of Donald J. Trump's private banker at Deutsche Bank, who also gave a $15 million loan to Jared Kushner.
Right.
And so
that was initially refused
because Deutsche Bank didn't want to do business with Kushner because old man Kushner was a crook, been to prison. And even Deutsche Bank said that's too much for us. Yes,
that's saying a lot.
We got our principles.
Yes, we'll deal with crooks that haven't gone to prison yet. But once they go to prison, we're not going to do business with them. All right, so they didn't want to do business with Kushner, but she gave him a loan anyhow. So her supervisor was found hanging in his house last week in Malibu, California. But before that was the other guy that killed himself, and his son found all the documents, and he actually tried to sell them. And an old Adam Shifty Schiff, beat him out of it and got the documents without paying anything for it. And so Adam Schiff's committee is in possession of those Deutsche Bank documents that came from a dead banker, all right, from the same bank, Deutsche Bank.
Right.
The inner workings of Deutsche Bank, according to some of the reports, meeting spreadsheets.
Right. So, but it tells you that they're on the trail of the Trump organization's business activities, the borrowing out of Deutsche Bank. But it does tie in Jared Kushner. And it was Jared Kushner who introduced the woman, what was her name?
Rosemary
Rebellic. She was introduced to Trump by Jared Kushner.
Right.
All right. So Kushner always shows up. He's the deal maker. He's the wheeler dealer. He's the man that makes stuff happen.
And he's a Presbyterian, right? Jared Kushner?
No, I think he's a Kabbalah practicing Jew. But does that mean anything?
I don't guess anymore.
No. But he won't be investigated, because if they investigate Kushner, it'll open up a can of worms that will take down the whole Zionist empire, just like they can't investigate Epstein.
Well, I think we talked about this.
By the way, Deutsche Bank did business with Epstein, too.
Yes, they did. Okay. The Mueller report, you said this then. If it ever comes to the point where they start looking into
they'll shut it down.
They'll shut it down. Even going back to Michael Flynn, does anyone actually remember what the meeting was about?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, it's about.
It wasn't about Russian election influence. It was Kushner pressuring General Flynn to pressure the Russians to vote in favor of the Israelis in West Bank settlements.
You'd think that'd be a major part of the story.
So that Kushner Incorporated was building houses in the West Bank.
Yes.
That's what it was all about. So Flynn's going to prison, but Kushner's not going to prison. Why? Because Kushner has protection. Why does he have protection? Because he's a Jew. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. I just said it.
It's the same reason Mr. Epstein didn't go to jail. Belonged to intelligence, right? That's what we're told.
Epstein ran a network for at least 30 years, recruiting, luring, kidnapping children.
Right.
Raped the most vulnerable.
13, 14-year-old girls to do what? He provided little 13, 14-year-old girls from poor families to be sexually abused by powerful, influential men in America. For what purpose? So that the Israelis could videotape the sex acts and blackmail the American politicians and control the White House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the Pentagon, the news media, everything. You want to know how America was destroyed in 30 years? Right there's the operation. Epstein. That's why nobody's investigating Epstein. That's why Ghislaine Maxwell's walking around free. That's why nobody's questioned her. It's why the FBI hasn't raided the Zorro Ranch. It's why nothing's going to happen, because it would implicate the Jews. And if you implicate the Jews, the whole operation is exposed, and the American people might actually realize they've been taken over and they've been compromised. And our leaders are low-life scum that screw little girls so the Jews can screw America. That's what's happening in this country. I just said it. That's what's going on in this country. And our FBI is corrupt. The Supreme Court is corrupt. The Justice Department is corrupt. The news media is corrupt. The whole country is corrupt because we've walked away from Almighty God and we've allowed Kabbalah practicing Jews to defile the nation. Put that video out. Go ahead and clip this video and send it out. I dare you. You won't do it because you're scared that the truth may get out to the American people. I'm had it up to here with the corruption in this country. Little children being raped for the benefit of Israel. That's all it's about, Doc. Little American children being raped for the benefit of Israel. American politicians raping little American girls to be videotaped by Israeli Mossad so that Israel can blackmail American politicians. That's the state of America today. God ought to destroy this country for what we've become. It's His mercy that keeps this country going 1 hour longer. We become nothing but filth in His eyes. And the American people are allowing it to happen. Why? Because you were enticed to sin. You'd have to give up your sin. That's the plan, Doc.
Yes. And it's worked very well.
It's working very well. You would have to, the American people would have to repent and give up their sins if they wanted to clean up the mess. So you won't do it. You'll let them take your children. You allow drag queens to go to the school library and defile your children's minds. You won't do anything about it.
You allow grown men to go into the bathrooms of women.
They won't do anything about it. You've been totally defiled and compromised. What's the society worth, Doc? What's it worth at this point? What is it worth? What value do we have as a society now? This is what's been done to us in about 30 years. About the same time Epstein's operation was underway. That's how we got to this deplorable mess as a nation. So if you think Jared Kushner is going to be investigated, go to prison, forget it. Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
But we told the story today.
We told the story. And what good did I do in telling the story? What value is it? I'm going to be vilified. I'm going to be hated. My name's going to be smeared. For what? So I tell the people how corrupt we've become as a society. The only answer is repentance. The American people would throw up. We would say, we're so corrupt, we're just going to vomit. It's nauseating how corrupt we've become as a nation. That's what is needed. The nation needs to spiritually vomit what we have become as a people. It's deplorable. It's sickening. And the only way it's going to change is repentance. And the only way there's going to be repentance is there has to be sorrow. And the only way there will be sorrow is that there has to be preaching. In order to have preaching, there has to be men with guts and backbone who fear God and not man. And we don't have it in this country anymore. We have cowards. We have little pansies in the pulpits. That's our state that we're in, Doc. And so the corruption continues. What do we have left? The only thing left is judgment. There's nothing left. Judgment. That's all there is to it. And if the American people won't repent, then God should end this country because we're destroying children. Children, their minds, their hearts, their souls are being defiled. They're going to spend eternity in hell because they never have a chance to hear the gospel. So the best thing God could do is to end this mess so no more children are defiled. How many children are you going to let Planned Parenthood cut up and sell their brains and their livers and their hearts? How many? What are we doing in this country? We have a Holocaust, yes. We have a Jewish-inspired Holocaust. The Jews are killing our babies in Planned Parenthood. Millions of them. The selling of organs as a Holocaust. And yet there's no outcry. There's no shock. And anybody that dares to expose it, they get crushed. The arm of the law comes against them.
Yes.
If you dare expose them. This is a corrupt country, corrupt, evil nation. We've become corrupt and evil. And the only thing left to do is for God to judge it. There's nothing else left. Nothing. There's nothing else left. There's no revival coming. There won't be a revival because there has to be repentance. And there won't be repentance because there has to be preaching. And there's no preaching because there's very few men of God left. It's as simple as that. Okay? So you're not going to have a revival. If you don't have a revival, you just continue to sink into the septic mire of this country. And we just destroy children. And it grieves God. We've become a stench before God. Oh, tomorrow's going to be Thanksgiving here, Doc. Who are we thanking tomorrow? Who are we thanking? What God are we thanking tomorrow? The God of abortion? The God of homosexuality? The God of perversion? What God are we thanking tomorrow? Because we certainly aren't thanking the God of holiness. We're not thanking the God of righteousness tomorrow. We're going to thank some made-up God. Because if we thank the real God, we'd have to get under conviction.
Right.
Not going to happen. People are going to be shopping. Maybe watching football. There's no thankfulness. What are they thankful for? You ought to be thankful that God hasn't burned the country down. That's what you ought to be thankful for tomorrow. You ought to give thanks that God has not allowed this country to burn to the ground. That's the only thing to be thankful for at this time. Don't thank Him for your stuff. Thank Him that He has not allowed this country to burn to the ground. Because that's the state that we're in right now as a nation. We've become absolutely filthy in the eyes of God and in the nostrils of God. We've become a stench because we tolerate this corruption. People know about Jeffrey Epstein. They're not going to do anything about it. All right? We had a man contact us the other day. He wanted to sell us video. He's got video of powerful people raping little children at Epstein's ranch. Wanted to sell the video to us. Oh, he didn't want to do something to get the people arrested. He wanted to make a buck. He worked at the ranch. He had video. Right? See, he wasn't grieved by what was done to the children. He just saw an opportunity. He had some video. He wants to sell it. Okay. How many people knew about Jeffrey Epstein and did nothing?
Thousands.
How many people worked for him and knew what he was doing and did nothing? How many people right now know what he did and they're doing nothing? Why aren't they doing anything? Because it'll blow the whole cover. The whole Jewish blackmail operation of the United States of America. It'll blow it wide open if they expose it. That's why the FBI is not going to do one thing about Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Barr, oh my, he came out the other day and he said, you know, I looked into that Epstein death and yeah, he did hang himself. He did commit suicide. Really, Mr. Barr? He said it was a comedy of errors.
Comedy errors, huh?
I didn't laugh about anything. Comedy of errors.
Shaky camera, no one watching the cell.
No, Mr. Barr, you know exactly what happened. And you can't, as the Attorney General, you can't investigate. He can't do it.
Because there's a higher authority.
Yes, there's somebody that controls him. And he is not going to investigate. Because too many men would go to prison. But who's going to put them in prison? Because the FBI is corrupt. The judges are corrupt. Who's going to report on it? The media is corrupt. They've all been compromised at Jeffrey Epstein's girl farm. It was all by plan. And the Israeli Jews have been laughing for decades. They can't believe how successful it's been. It worked better than anything they ever imagined. They franchised it. They took it to Paris. They took it around the world. It's working. But in America, they have multiple locations. New York,
Florida,
New Mexico, Florida.
New Mexico.
Yeah. They couldn't get enough girls to satisfy America's perverted political leaders. Think about that. They couldn't recruit enough. That's how the appetite of America's political leaders for pedophilia. Didn't it make you just want to throw up? Epstein's biggest headache every day was to find enough girls for American political leaders to rape so that the Israelis could videotape it. I mean, was it Maria Farmer who said that Epstein showed her the media room?
In New York,
there were men, employees, behind a fake wall, monitoring with
Bathrooms and
cameras
bedrooms.
to the bedrooms and the bathrooms. Where was that video going? Where was it going? Going to Ohio? A certain billionaire in Ohio connected to Israel? Is that where it was going? But we're not going to know because the FBI is not going to go there. It's off limits.
Case is closed now. He's dead, according to them.
Killed himself. I say he's in Tel Aviv. He's earned his retirement. All right. He put his 30 years in, Doc. He put his 30 years in for the Zionist state. This is what you got, America. Hey, take a look at all the smears that are against me today. The Zionist propaganda operation, they're attacking me all over the world. WorldNet Daily joined in too.
Yes.
I thought they're Christian.
Mm-hmm. Paul Begley.
Paul Begley, he attacked me too.
Yeah.
Oh my. Hadarat's, Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post, they're all attacking me today. All right.
For quoting them.
I quoted them.
Yes.
All I
You
did was
them.
quoted them, and they're attacking me. But they didn't watch the program.
Right.
It's all about smearing me because I have the backbone to say what's real, what's true. That's it. Hey, that's it for today. If you'd like to help us, I sure would appreciate it. That's what we do here. We tell the truth. We stand for God. I'll stand for God until I don't have any breath left or Jesus Christ comes. I'll never back down. I'll never compromise. I stand for Jesus Christ. I am not ashamed of the name of Jesus Christ. I will not disown him. I will not run from him. I run towards him. And I will always proclaim the name of Jesus Christ. If you would like to support a ministry that has that kind of courage, we need you to get behind us. Go to trunews.com. We're not at YouTube right now because I've been a bad goy and I've been sent to Siberia, and I have to write on the chalkboard 1,000 times, I will not be a bad goy. Will not be a bad goy. I will not be a bad goy. And but I am. I'm a bad goy. And so we're not on YouTube. So if you watch YouTube, you don't even know what I'm saying right now because you don't have enough common sense to get off YouTube and find us.
Enjoy the plantation.
You know, hopefully there's a lot of people that have finally woke up and said, we got to get off YouTube and follow Rick where he's at. We're at trunews.com every day. This is where we're at. Don't worry about YouTube, okay? They're censoring just about everybody, all right? But that's the world that we're moving into, censorship.
Digital ghettos.
Who is censoring who?
Oh, and you got Greenblatt with the ADL today.
Oh yeah, the president of ADL.
Demanding Twitter.
They want to deplatform me.
Right.
Now, are they also retracting their foreword for the transfer agreement book? So, still haven't heard that one.
I don't know.
Remember, is that one of their members?
Mr. Greenblatt, all I did was I read. If you would just watch the Friday program,
Just watch it.
I read the newspaper articles from Israel that boasted that the impeachment is led by Jews. I just read what they said,
Right.
but I'm smeared for saying it
Because you're not allowed to say
because
it.
I'm not allowed because I'm a bad goy. Hey. Well, hey, I need some bad goy out there to send us some good money, all right, to help us stay strong and keep going. All right, folks, it's not going to be easier as we get closer to the second coming.
No.
It's going to get worse. They're going to shut down every voice until Jesus Christ comes. Jesus said, you will be hated by all men for the sake of his name.
The scripture also say they might prevail for a time.
Yes.
Tough scripture.
Haul you off to prison. They'll haul you off to court.
Haul you to the synagogues.
Take you to the synagogues and flail you. All right? Where are they taking you? Jesus said they're going to take you to the synagogues and beat you. They didn't say you're going to take you to the mosque. They said they're going to take you to the synagogues and beat you. Well, I'm getting verbally beat in the synagogues right now. And if they have their way, they'll beat me physically if they could get their hands on me, because they don't know what to do with me.
They got to shut him up.
Yeah.
They got to shut him up.
Yeah. They can't shut me up. Cannot shut my mouth. Okay? Why? Because Jesus Christ has anointed me to preach his name. That's why the Jews have no power to stop me, because Jesus Christ anointed me to preach his holy name. Jesus Christ. And they have no power to stop me. Whatever, they can close doors, but God will open more doors. They can't stop the gospel. The Jews have tried for 2,000 years to hinder the gospel. And they can't do it. Jesus Christ is coming back. And I'm telling you, my friends, this is going to get very ugly and nasty the closer we get to the second coming. There will be persecution. There's already persecution. And it's intensifying. You have to make a decision. Are you going to stand with those who are boldly saying the name of Jesus, refusing to compromise, or are you going to draw back and hide? You got to make that decision. But it will be brought up on the day Jesus Christ comes back. All right? So I'm hoping that you'll stand with me. Go to trunews.com, click donate, give us a big Thanksgiving Day offering. And if you use PayPal, it's support@trunews.com. And then our address is Post Office Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida 32969. And we have a phone number that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 800-576-2116, 800-576-2116. You choose the method that you want to use to get a gift to us. All of them work, and we will rejoice when we receive your gift. We deeply appreciate every single person who stands with us. Thank you so much for watching. We have some special programs recorded for the rest of this week. We're going to be closed here for Thursday and Friday, but we do have some programs that we will release. Obviously, it won't be released on YouTube because I did that Jew-Coup show, and that's
catching on.
Boy,
There's a hashtag on Twitter now.
There's a hashtag, Jew-Coup hashtag?
Jew-Coup, and so that's catching on.
Well, actually, the Zionists are doing a great job helping me get this out.
I know, because you
Great
were
publicity.
You were featured in Times of Israel, Haaretz, Breaking Wind Israel News, Breaking Israel News. A number of outlets around the world that have picked up the story. It took them long enough, because the program was last Friday.
But they're helping me get the message out.
That's
that
right.
There's a Jewish coup of President Trump.
Finally, someone's asking, what if he's right?
If they'll just watch the program,
Yes.
they'll see that I quoted Jewish newspapers.
Right.
So it's anti-Semitic if you quote Jewish newspapers. Is that where we're at right now?
It's anti-Semitic if you connect the dots, Rick. That's what the anti-Semitic part is.
All right.
Hey,
Well,
don't forget to tell folks about Final Day.
Final Day. Final Day is my book about the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's more than just the second coming. It's all of it. It's the arrival of the kingdom of God. It's the judgment. It's the gathering of the wicked, the bundling to be burned of the wicked. It's all the graves opening, every grave of every human that's ever lived. wicked and saved, all the graves open on the final day. It's the extinguishing of the lights in the universe. It's the rolling up of the universe as a scroll. It's the judgment seat of Christ. It's the testing of our works. It's the appearance of New Jerusalem. It's God packing up everything and moving to New Jerusalem, and New Jerusalem is on the new earth. It's all of it. That's the final day. It is the greatest event in the history of the universe. I want you to get a copy of that book. Go to trunews.com, click the banner, and request your copy. Now, the books are not going to be shipped out until early 2020.
Right, because we've already gotten people emailing us, hey, when's the book? I haven't got my book yet.
I keep saying this. It's a pre-order. We haven't printed the books yet. All right, the book is waiting at the printer to be printed. It will be printed sometime in January. They're backed up that far in advance. So it will be out in January. You are pre-ordering it, which means that when the book is printed and we have the physical copies here, the pre-orders are filled first. Everybody else waits. And if we have to print a second run, then they have to wait. All right. The printing runs, I mean, the queue, the line, it's about 2 months when you place the order. So if we run out of books, so here's how this works. All right. I've only got so much money to buy so many books. I'm paying for this out of my pocket. It's a lot of money. All right. And I'm borrowing the money to do it. So it's not like I've got the cash. I don't. I'm borrowing the money to print the book. We're doing pre-sales. If all those books that we order, if they're pre-sold, the next batch would be coming out in the spring.
Right.
Okay. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if we get to January and this first batch is sold to the pre-orders, then I put in a second order. Well, I'm going to wait 2 months until it gets printed because the printing company is backed up.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. This is why you should get your pre-order in. Don't think, well, wait until he actually gets the books and then I'll order. Well, no, you might be waiting until March or April.
Yeah, we don't have the ability to print 1 million copies of the book at any given time.
But even when they show up, I don't even know where we're going to put them, Doc. Do you know how many books are coming in? I mean, we're talking a tractor trailer coming in here with books. These are thick, 448-page hardback books. It's going to be a lot of books, okay? So we've got logistical problems when they show up.
I'm just looking around. I think I know where they're going to go.
I'm starting to think now. I hadn't really considered that.
I have. I know how much space it's going to take up.
I've got a cubicle file.
And then we have to ship them. We have to package them and ship them.
Where are we going to put this desk?
Yes, all right. So that's why I'm telling you to pre-order, because you'll be first in line to get a book. Go to trunews.com, click the banner, and then it's $30. That includes the shipping. And that is for one book. If you want me to personally autograph it, we're asking for a donation of $100. And that offer will end at the end of the pre-order. I'm not going to do any more autographs after the pre-order. It's going to be too much time. I'm already concerned about, I'm trying to imagine how much time does it take to sign a couple thousand books. It's going to take a lot of time.
I'm starting to get worried about logistics now. And so, good problems to have.
Yeah. All right. Order your book now. It'll be out in January. Thank you so much. We'll see you. We'll have new shows Thursday and Friday, but we'll be back here with something else on Monday. God bless. Take care.
Happy Thanksgiving.